Some of the scariest machines in history weren't even made to kill people. They were built to keep you alive just long enough to really regret it. And the crazy part? These things didn't come from criminals or lunatics. They were created by the same systems that were supposed to protect us. So let's take a look at some of the torture methods humanity actually used. The strappado became infamous during the European Inquisition, though versions of it existed long before that. At first glance, the setup looks almost simple. The prisoners' hands were tied tightly behind their back, wrists bound so close together that blood circulation often cut off within minutes. A rope was attached, and they were hoisted into the air like a piece of hanging meat. That was the standard version. In many cases, weights, sometimes 20, 30, even 50 pounds, were tied to the prisoners' ankles, forcing their shoulder joints to take the entire load. Witnesses described hearing the pop of dislocated shoulders echo through stone interrogation chambers. The strappado was used widely across Italy, Spain, and other parts of Europe as a tool to extract confessions. But historians emphasize something important. Confessions obtained this way were notoriously unreliable. Victims would admit to anything: sorcery, treason, crimes they'd never heard of just to make the pain stop. What's unsettling is how controlled the whole process was. The strappado wasn't always a public spectacle. Often, it took place behind heavy wooden doors, deep inside castles or inquisitional chambers. The fact that it was done in private shows something chilling. Authorities weren't aiming to terrify crowds. They were aiming to break individuals. As Europe's legal systems slowly shifted toward what we now recognize as modern rights, the right to counsel, the expectation of evidence, the idea that confessions shouldn't be forced, the strappado faded out. But its legacy remains a reminder of how people in power justified extreme pain in the name of truth. The Judas cradle is one of the most infamous devices associated with medieval Spain. It's a horrifying blend of physical punishment and humiliation. Imagine a wooden pyramid, a sharp point at the top, polished from years of use. Victims were stripped, tied, and slowly lowered onto it, their entire body weight forcing them downward. What made it uniquely cruel had less to do with instant pain and more with anticipation. The process was slow, deliberate, and psychologically crushing. They could be left for hours or even days, positioned so their legs cramped and their backs spasmed, unable to shift without worsening the pain. Despite its dark reputation, historians believe the device may not have been as widely used as stories suggest. Some accounts might be exaggerated or even partially mythical, but there are recorded cases, usually involving accusations like heresy or treason, where a prisoner, after hours atop the cradle, finally broke and confessed. One chronicler described a victim who, after being forced onto the device, began screaming not from pain but from panic. This detail fascinates scholars because it shows how the device worked on multiple levels, not just tormenting the body, but crushing the human spirit. Whether used sparingly or routinely, the Judas cradle became a symbol of medieval cruelty. And even if some accounts are inflated, the fear it inspired was real. The message was simple: disobedience could bring consequences far worse than death. Developed in England during the reign of Henry VIII, the scavenger's daughter was the complete opposite of the rack. While the rack stretched a person, the scavenger's daughter folded them like a human paperclip. It was a metal frame shaped almost like a giant clamp. Prisoners were forced to crouch, knees to chest, head down, and the frame was tightened around them. The compression squeezed their lungs, slowed their breathing, and caused blood to rush to the head. Victims often emerged with bruised faces, burst blood vessels, and occasionally broken ribs. It was favored for political prisoners, people accused of sedition or treason. In some cases, prisoners were kept inside the device for hours, left to stew in their own pain until they either confessed or collapsed. One of the most famous cases involved a man accused of treason against the crown. After being folded into the device and left for an extended period, he produced a confession that historians now believe was partially fabricated, offered only to end the torment. What makes The Scavenger's Daughter particularly haunting is how mechanical and impersonal it was. There was no need for executioners to twist a wheel or hoist a rope. Once the frame closed, the device did all the work. Eventually, as England's justice system modernized and adopted new legal protections, the device fell out of use. But its design remains a chilling reminder of how engineering and cruelty can merge into a single object. The Brazen Bull is often cited as one of the most extreme execution devices in history. Attributed to ancient Greece, it was a hollow brass sculpture shaped like a life-sized bull with a door in its side and a system of bronze pipes inside. According to ancient accounts, victims were locked inside, and fires were lit beneath the structure. As the metal heated, it turned into a torture chamber, one that roasted its occupant alive. But the most horrifying detail is the pipe system. It was designed to convert screams into bull-like roars, turning the suffering into a grotesque public spectacle. Some historians argue that the device may have been used more as propaganda or intimidation than as a common execution method. Even so, its notoriety was powerful enough to survive thousands of years. One of the most famous stories surrounding the Brazen Bull is the tale of Perillos of Athens, supposedly the inventor. He presented it to Phalaris, a tyrant known for his cruelty. But when Perillos proudly demonstrated how the sound system worked, Phalaris allegedly turned on him, forcing him to test the device himself. Whether legend or true history, the Brazen Bull represents something chilling. A time when execution wasn't just punishment, it was entertainment. In parts of Asia, bamboo was more than a plant. It was a tool of discipline. Unlike many of the metal devices used in Europe, bamboo rods were readily available, easy to craft, and terrifyingly effective. Punishments ranged from quick strikes on the legs or back to extended beatings meant to leave long-lasting welts and bruises. Soldiers, criminals, and even civilians could be punished depending on local laws and the seriousness of the offense. One recorded account from Southeast Asia describes a soldier punished for negligence during military duty. The strikes were delivered in front of the entire unit. The goal wasn't just physical pain, it was humiliation, a reminder to everyone watching of the consequences of failing one's duty. While bamboo punishment was rarely fatal, it left marks that lasted for weeks and sometimes caused long-term damage if delivered with enough force. As legal codes modernized and governments shifted toward standardized penalties like imprisonment or fines, bamboo punishment gradually declined. Still, it exists in cultural memory as a symbol of strict discipline, a reminder that even simple tools can become instruments of control. The dunking stool might seem mild compared to other devices on this list, but the psychological impact was enormous. Used primarily in Europe and colonial America, it targeted individuals, usually women, accused of being scolds, a vague term for anyone considered disruptive, argumentative, or outspoken. The accused were strapped to a chair attached to a long wooden beam. Crowds gathered as the chair was swung out over rivers or ponds and repeatedly dunked into cold water. The victim couldn't protect their face, couldn't wipe their eyes, and couldn't catch their breath before being plunged again and again. Drowning was unlikely, but panic was guaranteed. Victims often emerged trembling, coughing water, and shivering uncontrollably. Legal documents suggest that the dunking stool was sometimes paired with other punishments like fines or public shaming. Over time, as social attitudes toward women evolved and legal systems moved away from humiliation-based penalties, the practice faded. But what remains is a disturbing reminder. Sometimes society didn't need metal or fire to torture people, just a crowd and a pond. Keel hauling was a naval punishment used by European fleets, particularly the Dutch and British navies. Life at sea was brutal, and discipline was enforced with methods designed to terrify sailors into obedience. The process was straightforward but deadly. Offending sailors were tied to ropes and dragged beneath the ship's hull from one side to the other. The danger wasn't drowning, it was the sharp barnacles and marine growth on the hull. A single pass could shred skin, open deep wounds, and leave a sailor permanently scarred. Multiple passes were often fatal. Naval logbooks, some surprisingly calm and matter-of-fact, record several instances where keel hauling resulted in death. These deaths weren't considered accidents. They were accepted risks of maintaining order aboard ships where rebellion, theft, or drunkenness could jeopardize an entire crew. As navies became more professional and established formal court systems, keel hauling was gradually abandoned. But its legacy lives on as one of the most feared punishments in maritime history. And the last one on this list is a device known as the breaking wheel. This wasn't a tool for questioning suspects or forcing confessions. By the time someone faced the wheel, the decision had already been made. There was no trial left, no mercy to appeal to. This was a public execution, and everyone was meant to see it. The breaking wheel was a massive wooden wagon wheel, sometimes reinforced with iron, used across Central and Western Europe for centuries. It was reserved for crimes considered unforgivable: murder, treason, arson, and acts believed to threaten society itself. This wasn't about punishment alone, it was about fear. The condemned was taken to a public square and tied down, arms and legs spread wide. Crowds gathered, not just to watch someone die, but to watch the law prove its power. The executioner then lifted the wheel and began striking the limbs, following an exact order written into the sentence. Nothing about it was random. Everything was deliberate. Death didn't always come quickly. Some victims died from shock. Others lingered for hours, sometimes longer, left exposed after their bodies were woven through the spokes of the wheel and raised for display. The suffering wasn't a side effect, it was the point. In some cases, the sentence even specified how it should begin. Breaking from the legs upward meant a slower death. Breaking from the chest down was considered mercy. That detail alone tells you how normal this kind of cruelty had become. The breaking wheel, sometimes called the Catherine wheel, remained in use until the late 1700s, when even societies accustomed to public executions began to see it as excessive. And that's why it earns its place at the end of this list. Because the breaking wheel wasn't just meant to kill someone, it was meant to be remembered. Torture was only one part of history's darker toolbox. Some of the other methods used for control were even stranger, devices that blurred the line between justice, intimidation, and pure cruelty. If you want more forgotten executions and real historical horrors, subscribe and turn on notifications. History doesn't end here. It just gets worse.